All right, so my name is Zack. I am an organizer with UMAW, United Musicians and Allied Workers. We are an organization that does organizing and advocacy for artists. Something that has meant a lot to me as I've engaged with UMAW is finding that community, and finding that community not just in like sharing space, but as in sharing fight, and realizing that not until the working class artists and working class musicians and working class in general can come together and unify our voice can we sort of enact and build the change that we want to change. And that is the sort of like central and driving point and force of UMAW. And I really do encourage you all to become a member. We are 100% member driven, member funded, and the more the merrier, the more coming in and joining the voice and being able to add your power and grow this community is really the only way that we can win what we want. And that, is like getting South by Southwest to ban defense contractors, writing legislation to create a new royalty for streaming. I mean, there are real things that we can accomplish, but only if you join us. I'm going to quickly introduce the panelists and then dive into what I'm imagining is going to be a really beautiful conversation. Taylor Weng is a creative singer-songwriter and audio and engineer who works as a radio editor at FYI.ai from Baltimore, Maryland. Her background extends into mental health care advocacy and companionship as she continues bridging the gaps between the creative world and the mental health world. Deaf Sound, pronouns they, them, is a Black Afro-Caribbean conceptual word artist born and based in South Central LA. Def is a post-binary contemporary hip-hop artist, producer, poet, educator, and award-winning academic. Def is Grammy-nominated for their work as a producer on Aja Monet's debut album, When the Poems Do What They Do. Beth Pickens is an art consultant with a background in counseling psychology, author of books Make Your Art No Matter What, and Art Will Save Your Life. Jonny Kosmo is an artist and psychologist and is the founder of our beautiful home here at Scribble. I also want to give a shout out to Scribble, who's opened their doors to us and has become really a central part of the LA music scene, and is just doing really good work that I'm sure we'll get into throughout this night.
So there's like kind of two questions that are in the air. One is about values and resetting our values, and then there's material conditions. Ooh, juxtaposition. So first of all, you have to be realistic about what are your material conditions? And that is my vocabulary word, like material conditions, because I will say that is why the Democrats lost. They did not address material conditions, straight up. Mm-hmm. Straight up. You can't appeal to the people if you don't know what they need, if you're in denial about what they need. Our needs are the rent's too damn high, the money too damn low. Mm-hmm. So how do we meet here? And the reality is that the taxes are being used to fund a genocide. That's why things cost too much. That's why it's free Palestine. That's why it's free Congo. That's why it's free Sudan. Let's get straight to the root. The material conditions are unlivable. Name it, say it. Music is a part of propaganda. We have to propagandize our reality. That's what hip hop has been about the whole time, is naming the conditions, then saying this is unacceptable. But instead, this has become individualized and not seen as a collective struggle. We are all struggling, and we have to unite in class struggle, which is what UMAW is about, is to say the only thing we have. We are all we got.
And to the two people, therapists who, I don't want to cross a line, but how central is material conditions for the artists that you speak to? How, working with artists and musicians, how often is it material concerns that you're hearing as the sort of something in the fore of what they're thinking about, aside or in conjunction with their more connection with their art?
It's primary. Artists live in cities so they can have access to opportunity and big creative community, and cities have become unlivable. I think artists are a really specific, interesting career counseling conundrum because you're the only workers who have jobs so that you can make your work. And so you end up working more than other workers, and your work and your working life is often not legible. I know you know this already. Like your work and your life is not legible to people around you who are not artists. It can be very difficult to explain. And it's also a kind of work, the artist's work, it's not something you have a choice about. Like I mentioned, you have to do this thing in order to have your fully realized life. So it's not an option, and then doing this in disaster capitalism or late capitalism, or whatever you want to call it, that system is crazy, and it makes the people in it feel crazy and personalize it like there's something wrong with me, when it's just the structural issues around us. And I have what I sort of think of as the artist quadratic formula, which is like having my life in practice plus making a living equals what the fuck. And that's an equation we're solving and resolving over and over and over. And it's, in my experience with artists, I've been doing this consultation for 15 years. I haven't, there's nobody just kind of finds a thing, sets it, and goes. We have to keep sort of resolving it over and over as they change, as the world around them changes, as the practice changes, as the economy changes. But yeah, like the number one thing my clients need is time, and we have to have money to buy time. And there's wage gaps in every sector, including the arts, gender and race-based wage gaps. And because we live in a culture that has secrecy around money and lack of transparency, it just benefits the ruling class. So, I'm really encouraged over the past 10 years of the growth and outpouring of more transparency about money in organizations like Wage, Working Artists for the Greater Economy, that sort of calls for a unifying system to paying artists and making it transparent. Because the further complicating thing for artists is, so you have all these jobs, you can make your work, and then the making of the work, maybe it's paid, maybe it's not. There's certainly no clarity. People are very vague. People are predatory. Artists work the hardest to get paid. I mean, like chasing down invoices, chasing down $100 they were offered, taking 6 months to get paid for a gig, things that like your dentist would never accept, right? And so all of these combine to make like a group of people feel really exhausted and come to me over and over with the existential question of like, I don't know how to do this, but I can't not do it. So that's what I say, this is like an equation we're solving over and over and over again.
What disturbs me even more is that artists on labels don't receive any health care whatsoever, and they're expected to be on the road constantly. Also, like the people who work there, who are sitting behind computers, get health insurance. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying, what the fuck? So, like, one of my goals and hopes for this organization is I would really like to reach out to record labels and offer them the idea that, maybe they donate a certain amount of money to this organization a year that entitles all their roster to have mental health services with us. That's something that's like a huge goal of mine here. I will say I have not been met in the best ways by that in reaching out to places thus far. But I'm still going to be persistent about it.
When we feel that defeat of like, damn, the conditions haven't changed. And, what do I do as an artist? Like, what is a poem really going to do right now? And I wanna just like behoove us. I want to encourage us to have the courage to tell the truth. I think that's what we're here to do, is to tell the truth about it. perspective is so valuable. And when archaeologists look at past times, they're looking at art when they go through the archive. That's portrait. You know, how else do we know what they was wearing back in the day? Was it no photographs? There was also poems. There was writings. These things are important, and if we don't tell the truth about it, there are people who are here to erase that. That is their whole job, is to legislate an erasure. And that's why they burn the books. You know, that's very important. So I think that your role is actually really vital, bro. Get it together. Or tell us the truth about how you don't have it together. I also think that I was speaking with a friend about mental health, and I was like, I don't know what to say over here. It's a tough time, but thinking about therapy, thinking about the necessity of that, I think there is a romanticization that music, especially I will speak from Black male socialization, that music is my therapy. And no way. Um, I really don't advocate for that. Because I think one of my friends, Kiko, said that art is not a substitute for policy. That is really important. And I think that I want to say on a personal note, I only had access to therapy once in my life, like where I was able to be paid for it and everything. And that was because I was an artist. Not because I had the money, not because of anything else, but I had access to therapy, which is not, art is not the substitute for that. It's to say that, you know, we all need people to speak to. And we need it. And when we talk about truth telling, I think we have to look at it as a practice because most of our life is about denial here. So we have to practice telling the truth. It's not rewarded out here. So that is a practice, and I think when we acknowledge our material conditions, then we can actually give each other more grace.
And maybe you have a particular insight into just because you speak with a multitude of creatives, but what do they or you see as the reason for creating amidst daily trauma? And what is the impact that our work can or shouldn't have? It should not maybe like replace therapy, but maybe it should be speaking truth to power or some sense of catharsis for someone.
I mean, people can't survive without art. Not just artists who make it, but we couldn't have a culture. We wouldn't have any functioning culture. And whether or not this is fair, we look to artists to facilitate feeling and to explain the ineffable. So all of art history, as you were gesturing at, is trying to explain death and the divine. And artists, I think, are the best possible people for doing that. Which is, if we get to the root of all fears we have as humans, we're afraid we're gonna die, and we are gonna die. And artists are the best possible opportunity to explain, interpret, reflect death and the divine. That's a really tall order for people who are also like struggling to live in expensive cities and all the crises of mental health of modernity. And so I do crazy things with my clients. Like I put them on social media moratoriums where they cannot be on social media for a month at a time to have like kind of a reset. It's very hard now to get bored, right? Like it's hard to get bored. And artists have to be able to sift through anxiety, levels of fear, returning to the internet over and over again to get down to like the subterranean stuff that is like, oh, that's what I want to say. It's down here. And it's difficult to traverse all that territory to get there. And we need quite a bit of quiet to get there. And quiet is also a difficult thing to have now. The artists I work with seem to really understand that the more they are well, the more work they'll make, you know, and the better the art gets, that suffering doesn't produce art, that's sort of like some myth in the larger culture that they're just like, well, that's just not true. Every once in a while I'll encounter an artist who wonders if, well, if I don't have this addiction, will my art be good anymore? Or if I don't have this like
thing that I know is hurting me, like, will it somehow change the art? And we just talk about like, the more well you are, just the more art you make, and the deeper you can go. Yeah, I don't find, and the fetishization is definitely a cultural trope, right? Like, but I don't experience that in the lived life, the daily lives of the client that I work with. Like, they don't believe that.
And then you have the other side of like, who's on the receiving end? Because we also have a lot of these huge artists cosplaying the struggle, right? And pretending to be one of us all the time. And so that also being on the receiving end, being young, listening to, I remember when Nicki Minaj was like, Future hasn't drank lean in years. Like, nobody knows that. And everybody was like, what is she talking about? Is this real? Like, it legitimately affects the youth. Very incredibly so, to a scary degree, but it does. But I think in general, with mental health, I struggle with that individually, of like, who am I without this extra thing? Who am I without anxiety? Who am I without my depression and my struggles and all that stuff? So I definitely see it, you know, translating. And then once you monetize something like painting, it's a very tricky space to navigate after that. Here's all this money because of how awful you're doing. Keep it up. What am I supposed to do with that? That's a pretty tough space also. And then you can get into exploitation, right? Of the person in power understanding that this is how you're making all this money.
I feel that. And I think as Black artists, our trauma is always perceived. I think it's something that there is a consumption issue, but I also think that it's our duty, as long as we're alive and we have this ability, to fuck around and find out, heal, collectively, tell the truth. I think when we saw Mr. Morale, right, when the Kendrick record came out, there was a hunger for something else. There was a confrontation with the culture. And I think directly, just to get into it, directly, there's a correlation between the beef and the release of Mr. Morale. When Mr. Morale came out, I said, that's an invitation. That record is an invitation for us all to grow up, to really get into it. Tell the real truth. Go in on it. This is how that can sound, right? So, an example, an artist that big at that time in his life, Damn was great. He had just won a Pulitzer Prize. Now I'm going to tell you about how my mom was hurt by abuse and how that affected me and how we need to heal. There's a line on the song, Mr. Morale. Hydrate. It's time to heal. Drink some water. Like, that's what I mean. It's propaganda to get us to get out of here. We have to make the music. We have to make the spells to heal ourselves for real. So the beef, what I took big issue with, the beef between Drake, Kendrick, and J. Cole. Even though he tried to bow out, he still said something. You remember, might delete later. But the thing that I had a big issue with was that both of those artists that went at Kendrick directly dissed that album, which is a cultural problem. I didn't like that. I took that personally. I said, no, don't diss the album. You can talk about Kendrick, but you can't diss that album. Because that album was an invitation, which you guys did not take, which is why you're going to take this album. So that's how it happened. Keep going down the line. You have an artist like Tyler, who is the only artist that I've seen on a mainstream level to take the invitation. Listen to that Chromacopia album. He took the invitation to tell the truth. Look at it, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And that's on a mass level. I'm just saying that our trauma is always for sale, but also there's healing in the truth telling of it. Now we just have to understand who it's for. And when we're making art in the dark, which is a lot of the time that we're making art is not visible to anyone else, we have to train ourselves to make things, whether there's a light or not, whether anyone is looking, whether anyone cares, whether anyone likes your post, you gotta do this thing. and it's a beautiful gift. And yeah, I'm just happy to the artists who have shown us how to do it beautifully.
Thank you. I love that. There's so much eye contact in this, because I feel like I really need to hear as an artist who wakes up every day being like, well, fuck. So just a aside, thank you, y'all, for preaching the word here.
I was just thinking about how one thing that I think musicians might struggle with a bit is that there's a difference between community and networking. And that like sometimes like somehow the word community has got a little bit turned into networking a little bit. I see that like it's like I'll show up to your show, you show up to my show, and then you know, like let's like and there's a difference between I think like again like I keep going back to like the capitalist agenda here to kind of keep climbing some sort of thing, but I really want to invite the idea that like there's a spirit element to community that I think is really important that gets a little bit twisted within the word as it applies to artistry as it comes to success, and that's something that I just wanted to acknowledge a bit. I have never, I don't come from a background of running a venue at all, and I will say that once this space opened and we started hosting shows, I quickly realized that all venues are really just a way to sell alcohol. In reality, like they really like. I started reflecting a lot also on like what I've gotten paid, and I was just so upset. I was just so upset because the one thing is that like, this space for me in terms of like you know no small acts of resistance like this space is a resistance against the alcohol based industry that has taken over entertainment. And it is really hard. I have had several people read me out on the phone, cancel shows, promoters being like, how can you have a show without alcohol? How are we gonna sell tickets? Like I have come over the past year of this place being open, I've had so much pushback on it. And in terms of it relating to mental health, I'll tell you what, like there's a difference in seeing a show in a space that does not serve alcohol. Like a complete difference. Like, what's that? Social dark. I mean, there's just like an intimacy that's built in, and I think that that is also uncomfortable for people. And my answer to that is good. Like, good. Like, let's connect. You know. So for me, I'm really. I think it also dovetails into kind of like the like suffering of like an artist and what has to happen. I mean, I might be a little biased. I am a person. I'm a sober person. I have a background where I was like for years. I shot heroin and daily and toured and all these things. As soon as I stopped doing that and started touring as a sober person, I quickly realized like I just want like a meal. Like I don't want like drink tickets. What the fuck? Like I just want like a bowl of chili. Like like some saltines at least. And so for me, I'm like really interested in also like the ways in which the alcohol industry does it is impossible to remove that from the mental health side of things that are happening to touring people. I work with a lot of people. I know I have a lot of friends who they're not like alcoholics or anything, but when they're on the road, they're like, what else is there to do? I mean, like it's a hurry up and wait game. Get to the venue at 3 o'clock for sound check, and then sit around. And yeah, well, we don't have we don't have any lasagna, but we got like a packed Bud Light in your freaking room. So for me, it's like how do we actively kind of challenge like alcohol in this artist path? And I think there's definitely been movement in it. I want to say, like, I think there's a lot of artists who have witnessed how the effects of substance use and alcohol use has killed people. We've lost a lot of people. We continue to lose a lot of people. And I think that there's a lot more musicians getting sober, I've noticed, which is a really great thing because they're realizing like if they want to continue to be a part of this spiritual practice for the rest of their lives, it's just not going to work out. You can't sit in the van all day, drinking every night, and expect to feel good, you know? So yeah, sorry, I just kind of.
You gotta be a clear channel for message to come through.
Yeah, true.
Storytelling is a technology, and I think that there's in the common narrative or dominant narratives that we engage with through what we came up with, the stories that we've heard previously. There's a thing called the tyranny of closure, and that is to say that there must be a moral to a story. But we are forever becoming. So maybe there is no moral to the story. Maybe the bad guys don't get what they deserve. Maybe we're here to witness each other. You know, there's that, and something that I use as an artist is to think of a release as a release. R-E dot lease. It is no longer mine. It's here for you. So I released it by releasing. So there is something that you open yourself up to. Your work is not done once it's out. That's a part of it, you know? Now it's about the sharing and the resonance that you have no idea what the work can do. We have to admit that. We have no idea until we release it. So I encourage you to have the courage.
I also just wanted to add really quickly, maybe there's also a space where you explore this pull to like add this second layer of this healing part.
Yeah.
Because even you using the word trauma dump, like who told you that? You're just sharing, right? Maybe it was hard as whatever, right? And that's why maybe somebody at one point was like, that's too much for me. And maybe that's why you feel like it's a trauma dump. Maybe these types of conversations, there's a lot of overgeneralization of how awful and how dramatic and how damaging music can be, may or may not be. These frequencies may be too low, XYZ. So maybe there's also a world where you have a lot of that coming in too. Because you, like, when you say like you're tired, maybe there's not much more for you to do, right? Maybe that exhaustion is coming from spending time somewhere else that you don't need to be. Maybe it is finished, and there's just a little fear with being as authentic as this sucked really bad. Here's what I have. Enjoy it. That's okay too.
I just wanted to add one thing if I could speak. Is that therapy school really fucks you up? And just from my personal experience in terms of like making art, there's a lot of shoulds that start entering the picture that, and I don't know if that resonates for you, but I was hearing like maybe there is something that, and so I just want to acknowledge that like, perhaps there's like therapy room or therapy school in the room with you a bit when you're writing. And I wonder if there's a way to kind of like kindly ask it to step outside of the studio for a bit.
These are really difficult conversations to engage with, and I hope folks found some healing or maybe some tools. Journal, go to a thing and meet people, go to therapy, hydrate, dismantle capitalism, you know, the normal things. I'll say again, join an organization, engage in your own work and in order to make the world better. And thank you so much. Jonny, Beth,
So I counsel artists all day. That's what my job is, and kind of a foundational underpinning of my work with artists is that an artist's creative practice is an essential way that they take care of themselves, no matter what's happening in the world, and that having an ongoing, ever-strengthening relationship to a practice is something an artist has to have for their entire life. And that's what makes artists different than me and the rest of the world. Like, everybody benefits from creative exploration, but what I've found professionally is that artists are people who need it to have a fully realized life. And so protecting a relationship to a practice, one's relationship to oneself, and then deciding what do I put out into the world and how do I want to engage with the world is crucial. I find that when artists have any kind of separation from their creative practice, their life quality deteriorates. So a grounding thing that I'm doing with all artists, no matter what's happening politically, and I imagine the next 6 to 8 months are going to be mimic 2017 a lot with the artists that I work with. And in the aftermath of the 2016 election, what I heard from artists a lot was, I have to stop making art, or this isn't important anymore, I have to go to law school, or whatever things that they were saying, that this isn't enough or meaningful. And my plea to artists was that you have to do this to have a fully realized life. You have to do this to take care of yourself. And then you have choices about how you engage the world with your work. But that this is a sanctuary and a balm, and it has to be protected.